I honestly didn't expect that by the time I got to the third video, I'd actually have something to say about pose creation. But here we are. Surprisingly, I do. And it's kind of wild when I think about it, because this time around, I ran into a bunch of issues that really made me stop and reflect on the process. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether these issues happened because I was lacking in skill, though, let's be real, I don't actually believe that. Or if it was just a matter of making a misstep somewhere along the way and not being able to backtrack easily. Either way, it turned into a bit of a chaotic ride. Let's start with the first issue. Well, I wouldn't even call it a problem in the traditional sense. It was more of a creative mismatch. You see, I had selected a piece of Sims 4 game furniture for the pose, a chair that, in the reference photo I was using, looked identical to the one I had. But as I started working, I realized something was off. In the photo, the chair was clearly smaller, so the person's hands could naturally go behind it. But in my version, the chair was much bulkier. And that created a dilemma. If I tried to scale my sim to match the chair and recreate the exact positioning, I would have ended up with this hilarious giant sim towering over everything else in the game. Like, imagine loading into your save file and seeing this oversized sim squished into their living room. Funny, sure, but not quite what we're aiming for with realism in pose making. So instead of forcing it, I had to improvise. I ended up adjusting the pose so that it wasn't an exact replica of the reference image. And honestly, I think that's okay. It's a reminder that you don't have to recreate every photo to perfection. Sometimes, the pose will evolve into something a little different, and that's part of the creative process. In cases like this, we really have a few options. We can either search for alternative CC that better matches the reference, which can take time, and we're all familiar with how deep the CC rabbit hole goes, change the idea entirely to suit what we do have, or create a pose specifically for Blender users, who can freely adapt props, sizes, and other details with way more flexibility. But as I've mentioned before, and I'll probably keep saying this, my main focus is creating poses for in-game use, rather than just Blender renders. I want these poses to feel usable and natural in the Sims 4 gameplay environment, which means I often have to make small compromises. And sometimes, I just get lazy. Honestly, I'll admit it. I didn't feel like searching for another chair CC. That's what happened here. So I rolled with what I had and made it work, even if it meant veering away from the original reference a bit. And I think that's valid. That kind of improvisation is part of what makes pose making fun and personal. But that wasn't the only struggle I had this time around. The next major headache? Arm rotation. You'd think by now I'd have arm movement totally figured out. But no, sometimes even I get tripped up. I was working on the arm and hand positioning for this pose, and it just wasn't coming together. It reminded me of the very first video I shared, where I did a similar hand pose. So at first, I thought I'd be able to replicate something like that from scratch. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. I kept trying to rotate the arms and hands in a way that looked good, especially considering I was using an accessory, handcuffs in this case, from the amazing creator Mel Bennett. Seriously, if you haven't checked out her work, you should. Her accessories are next level. I'll include a link to her Patreon in the description so you can go support her too. Anyway, with the handcuffs in play, things just weren't lining up right. I kept adjusting and readjusting, trying to look at the pose from different angles, and it was just not working. That's when I paused and asked myself, why am I stressing out about this so much? Then it hit me. I had already made a similar pose before. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I simply went back to that first pose I made, opened it up, copied the arm position, and pasted it into my new pose. With just a few tweaks and refinements, it fit perfectly. It was honestly such a relief. And yes, I do this a lot. You could call it cheating on myself. reusing and repurposing parts of previous poses. And guess what? That's totally okay. If you're the one who made the original, you can copy and adapt it as much as you want. No one's going to judge you for that. In fact, it's smart to build on what you've already done, especially when you've put a lot of time into perfecting certain movements or angles. But, and this is important, never do that with other people's creations. Reusing your own work equals resourceful and efficient. Stealing someone else's work equals not okay. Unfortunately, some post creators have done this in the past, taking other people's work, editing it slightly, and trying to pass it off as their own. I'm not going to name names, but if you were around during that particular drama, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The community was rightfully upset, and it served as a big reminder: respect each other's creativity, always. So yeah, copy yourself, remix your own work, recycle and repurpose what you've made. That's totally fine. But always draw the line when it comes to someone else's content. That's just basic respect. To sum it all up, this third video has been an eye-opener. I ran into problems I didn't expect, learned, again, that improvisation is key, and reminded myself that it's okay to reuse your own work if it helps move things forward. Pose making isn't always smooth sailing. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it's also super rewarding, especially when you finally see it come together in-game and it just works. So to all my fellow pose creators out there, keep experimenting, keep adapting, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Even the tricky sessions teach you something valuable.